here! I voted for you! Wait a minute. That guy on the grassy knoll's got a gun. He's gonna shoot the president. Holy smokes, I've gotta do something. All right, Lee. Time to become an American hero.
22 November Network, Indianapolis Media proudly present to you the Lone Gunman Podcast with your host, Rob Clark, where research comes to shine and myths come to die. Stay tuned, be right there.
What if flying saucers were real? What if Hitler had a saucer and planned an attack on New York? What if America developed a radar-invisible flying saucer and the CIA used alien invaders as a cover for top-secret military experiments? For 50 years, the world has been flying saucer crazy. We've seen so many that more people now believe in aliens than in God.
There were flying saucers everywhere. It's just imagination, but I saw them just...
The truth is rather more complex. Flying saucers do exist, but they don't come from outer space. They come from Earth and the darkest recesses of military research.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode number 102 of the Lone Gunman Podcast. This is your boy Rob Clark with you along for the ride today, and I got a great show. I got a return guest come back on the show. Richard Gilbride joins me again, and we're going to get into today a little bit about Nazi UFOs, Operation Paperclip, Fred Crispin, Thomas Beckham. But I started off the conversation speaking to the man himself about Buell Frazier. Now, there's been some feedback from my Buell Frazier episode, so I wanted to ask Richard anyway, because he's the guy that actually transcribed the tapes from the National Archive, from the HSCA interviews of all these depository workers. So, who better to ask than the man himself, who brought us these important interviews in print and worked hard transcribing them and gave us the audio. And I wanted to get his take on the newest Roy Lewis allegations and, you know, just what it means in his scope of things. It takes about 20 minutes or so to clear up Frazier, and then I promise to stick around and we will get right into, the real life X-Files type stuff. And it's crazy because, of course the X-Files got rebooted this year. And I used to watch it all the time back in the 90s when it was on television. And I had downloaded the first 2 episodes of the X-Files and didn't actually get to watch them until Sunday night. I talked to Richard on Saturday. And for those of you out there who have watched the new season of the X-Files, it's eerily similar to what me and Richard were talking about on Saturday. So, hence the name for this program, The Real Life X-Files, and I hope you enjoy the show. I just bear with us, because, we're not talking about little green men and from outer space, and, I know when we're talking about the Kennedy assassination, when you start mentioning UFOs and Marilyn Monroe and the Nazis, people's eyes start glazing over and they just shut it out. But it's important to establish this whole UFO story and cover up to really illustrate who exactly and what level of an operative that Fred Crispin actually was. Okay? And in order to do that, we need to explore the topic of UFOs and try to figure out exactly what they were doing. So without further ado, people, please enjoy Richard Gilbride. Oh, and by the way, this episode was made possible from donations by you guys. So keep them coming. I appreciate it. and I bought some Skype credits so I could talk to Richard. You know, he doesn't have computer access, so I used Skype to record our conversation and called his cell phone. And he sounds great, and I sound like doo-doo. So I think I need a new microphone. But it's not that bad. But please do enjoy the show, and head over to tlgpodcast.com to donate and to check out all the links for this show, all the pictures for this show. And without further ado, I bring to you the author of Matrix for Assassination and JFK Inside Job, Mr. Richard Gilbride. Did you get a chance to listen to that Roy Lewis audio?
I did not listen to it, but I looked into the information that, I'm inclined not to agree with it. I think it was probably kind of hearsay. He didn't know him all that well. He said, I looked up his FBI report, and, he says he was acquainted. Because he was another oil filler, but a lot of guys did not know him, Lee Harvey Oswald, all that well, because he just was kept to himself and was pretty quiet, basically. And only the guys who he'd interact with on a regular basis, be it like James Jarman, the checker,
right,
or Wesley Frazier, or Billy Lovelady. I mean, otherwise he was basically all by himself, just would keep to himself and read yesterday's newspaper, and just get through the workday. But he was very good at his job. And the other woman I looked up, Mary Hollies, because she actually lives down near the Texas Theater. And so she took the bus, supposedly, and it would swing by on its route past his rooming house. And, but,
see, I've never come
unfortunately, she
across
said,
anything about, anybody riding the bus with him to work.
Yeah, you'd think you would, but, if you kind of think about it, like I had an experience with, in my 20s, I had to live in Boston a little bit, and I had to take a bus for a while. And you basically get on, and I would basically stare out the window or daydream. I just wouldn't pay much attention. So I don't think it's really a potential source that and someone would tap into to try and figure out if they saw this guy, but they did not, which was unfortunate because they could have asked a whole bunch of people as to his comings and goings, but they decided not to. So they did not explore that avenue. But with him having the bus stop right across the street from his rooming house, and him not getting along with his wife Marina, but loving his baby daughters. And Rachel had just been born on like October 16th. So that kind of gave him the motive to want to be out there at least for the weekends,
Yeah.
And they wouldn't be fighting with each other, him and Marina. But there was just that one time he missed out. I guess he was. They thought they had seen him shooting at a sports drone rifle range or something.
Yeah, him and Frazier.
Double or what? Yeah. I mean, so there was one weekend he missed, but otherwise he basically was out there. And the thing was, Wesley was living with his sister right down the street from the Payne's house, and he said he just said no problem. I think what Wesley is telling a straight story, but the question mark with what I have with him was he was filmed I think early in 1964, or no, he's filmed the next day standing outside his car and then telling the story about the curtain rods, and that's when the voice stress analyzer this guy from the CIA developed said that he was lying about that particular incident.
Right.
So I think that correlates with the story with Eddie Shields about him supposedly seeing Frazier parked down at the warehouse and someone yelling out, "Hey, where's your rider?" He said, and Frazier saying, "No, I dropped him off at the building."
Right.
I mean, so that would be the whole different spin on the official story, which was he followed them. Oswald carried a package from his car. He followed like 50 feet behind them or whatever. That's just what I think is the make believe on Frazier's part. But only Wesley Frazier can give that to us, because unless he does or until he does, and he it's not that I don't think I think he's a good person, fundamentally a good person.
Right.
I think he got shanghaied into doing stuff that just went way beyond what he expected. And he, part of it was just, kind of, being a,
well, he was probably scared to death, too.
Yeah, absolutely scared to death. Well, plus with his, having kids and stuff. But he had gone to the Army after leaving the book depository. He did like 2 stints in the Army.
Yep.
I think the threat of Vietnam always hung over him, and I think a threat, of whatever it be, whatever damage they can do, because he, found a girl and had children and stuff, and so he got little kids and got his own all family besides his own self that is always under the the sword of Damocles is always threatening. If he ever tells the truth, it's just going to be murder for his family. And I think when he came out, it's something I thought about after our last conversation, because you had mentioned he had come out with a story that Oswald had gone out the back dock, and he had volunteered this to about 8 years ago in some interview.
Yeah. And
the thing was, it's not credible because there's so much evidence that Oswald came out the front.
Exactly.
So what he is following all the researchers and stories or whatever, and just trying to find a hole in that. If he can, give a fake witness sighting that Oswald actually went out the back door, that will give him added credibility that he's reporting something no one else did, but it's just it's make believe, unfortunately. I guess he spoke at Lancer last year, or maybe the year before, in one of those. And so he's starting to come out of the woodwork. And he's 67 years old or so. And I don't know how you're going to get him in a situation where he feels like he's compelled to tell the truth, or else, there's going to be a consequence.
Well, he's writing a book, so we'll see.
We'll see, yeah. But someone's got to drill him give the hard questions. I mean, my whole take on him, I could be greatly mistaken, but I'm just trying to present a case that there's a lot there that needs to be, determined on his part. Because I mean, if he was there, if he had shut off the power to the elevators once the police started searching the building, I mean that's pretty incriminating. That kind of means that you knew beforehand you were going to do that. You knew beforehand that Kennedy was going to get shot at.
Yeah.
I mean, so what's the reason for this? Who set you up for this? And he could say so much more. And the thing was, I tried to, at the end of my own little essay there, just tried to show that he really had insight into how it was such a military-run operation. I mean, he's a great witness for that. He's just a little, pawn in the whole scheme of things. But if the military were running that show, I mean, he really had the, perception to, describe that. He was a great witness to that. He said it was a military operation. A military thing, and I think people would look into that. That's basically what he said. So,
well, his HSCA interview, I think it was from tape 3. He was talking to Moriarty, and I think if I'm remembering correctly, he said something like, I don't know, but I'll tell you this: I knew that he hid the rifle, and then he said he was standing on the steps, and he thought to himself, "Oh my God." I just know I don't want to be pulled into this, or something to that effect.
Yes, exactly. He said that in the HSCA interview, but his story for the Warren Commission was he didn't know anything about a rifle.
Right.
So it was 2 different stories there. So yeah, I mean.
And I think did you transcribe that or?
Yeah, I did. I had to get the free trial of some professional audio software,
Right.
$500 software. I had it for 1 month, and I got through as much as that scratchy recordings as I could. I'd do like about 3 minutes a day, and I had some time off in the winter to do that. But it was almost a month's work to even get like 40 pages worth. And the thing was, it was so jumbled. It was really, really difficult to determine what words were. I made like 2 different drafts and just kept going over and over things until it made sense. And
yeah. Well, that one little piece of what Fraser said, I think it possibly could have been, instead of "I knew he hid the rifle," it could have been "I knew he had the rifle." You understand what I'm saying? Like it could.
Yes. It can easily be misinterpreted, and plus they were supposedly going to prepare a transcript of that for the public. What part of the Moriarty was going to hand it to his secretary or whatever, and she was going to make up a transcript, and that should be publicly available, but it's not. It's gone, because we should be able to read a document because it was a 4-hour recording, so we should have a transcript of that available, but it's all hidden away, I mean,
and there's other 2 tapes, you couldn't even get through them? They were just too badly damaged?
Yeah, 2 hours worth. It's just a real low tape. It's almost comparable to an old cassette tape that maybe if your sister had in the attic for like 25 years and you finally found it again. It never been touched. It's like some old Ozzy Osbourne tape or something, and it just wouldn't, it would just sound like hell. And
yeah, it's a shame.
It was a shame because they physically deteriorate eventually over time. And I think I had been probably the first person in 15 years to even attempt to listen to it. Because all those tapes, amazingly enough, they were all in like a couple of shoe boxes in the archives. This is a whole ream of New Orleans stuff and on that I just did not have the time for. And I looked through depository employee stuff, and I grabbed as much as I could. And finally at the end of when I saw that I had half a day left, I found a Marina Oswald tape from her interview on I think it was November 23rd, and it looked like one of these beautiful new Memorex tapes. I said, "Great, this is good quality tape, almost brand new." But it turned out it was like it would speed up and slow down and just go, totally out of whack. And I don't know whether someone was trying to play with my head with the controls, because I went to about 6 different tape stations, to try and make sense of this particular tape.
Right.
And as I mentioned, like a year later, the director of that audio-visual place got arrested for taking stuff home.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know. Potentially they could be monkeying, with the equipment while someone's listening to it. I don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me because it's funny. It's like this whole national security mental block that people have, that because we're banging on the doors of the truth, and they still can't hack it. They really can't. I mean, I don't know what to say there.
Yeah.
It's just,
well, you managed to get a lot of that audio up on the old ROKC site too, from a lot of these HSCA interviews, and I listened to or tried to listen to a few of them, like Billy Lovelady, and it's a task. I will tell you that. It's very hard to do, or make it. Try to make out exactly what they're saying.
Yeah. You have to be a devotee, and you have to listen so carefully and double check your own stuff. And some of there were audios that were just not good enough quality to even publish. There was Amos Ewins was one, and then there was another Patrick Dean.
Oh, really?
Got missed out on, which never got published. He was the sergeant in the basement when Oswald got killed. And there was some things that was just the problem was that they were talking too close to the microphone, basically, and it really distorts the sound quality, and it's a little bit irritating to have to listen to. But Frasier, I'm serious, it was like, you're listening in a raging snowstorm with a crackly fire, and it was so hard to make out the words, just a minor little rumble in the background. But I double checked that. Once I made the final transcript, I double checked it against the whole scratch and tuned my ear into what the tape was on and played them both together. And I know that the final transcript I made is like 98% accurate. I know it in my heart. So that's all we got. That's all we got.
Well, hopefully that clears up some things for some people, because I did a show about Frasier and a lot of these HSCA interviews and about Roy Lewis, what he just said, and it just seemed odd to me, that all these guys would have them arriving together, and Roy Lewis had playing the day, Monday through Friday, every day, and it was like, wow. And, it just kind of matches, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, it's not written in stone, but it is interesting, to think about that possibility, if you...
Well, a case could be made, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, a case could be made. But, it's just, this is one of the problems with this case. It's just, it's so ambiguous. It's just, a nightmare to get a firm bead, on what, where, the evidence, quote unquote, leads you to, because it's just, people have been knocking their heads for this for 52 years now. It's just, like in my case, I mean, I've specialized in the depository, and I just have to eventually take one take on it. This is my, my conclusion. And I've made tons of mistakes over the years, but slowly built up my case that the elevator was used for the escape, and I just, I have to live with that. And that's what I would present to a jury or whatever, and see what they decide. And unfortunately, I've called the the former DA down in Dallas, and he wouldn't, really wouldn't respond. So I talked to his secretary, and he would make himself unavailable because people are still too scared to touch this thing. And I think the problem is there has to be like a political will, like in local Dallas politics, to try and make this, in actuality, the whole grand jury investigation. But without a favorable political climate, like after the Oliver Stone movie, for example, you had people pounding on the doors of Congress, and this is crazy. But now it's just everybody they want to go back to sleep. They just don't want to know the that there was an unspeakable evil actually that was carried out by this country, which murdered its elected leader. And,
yeah.
I don't know, but so the kind of the diehards or whatever we want to call it, just have to carry the torch.
That's
and
right.
see what happens, because maybe something will work out. You never know, because probably the best shot actually is getting a clear photo of that prayer man. Because if we can get that and get that on the news, say, that would really people would really turn their heads. If they saw a picture of Oswald there in the doorway, when the shooting was going on, it's just like, oh. It's like he's like the little Dutch boy with his finger in the dike. Because if Oswald didn't do this thing, you'll suddenly get the whole dike burst, and you just won't have any answer. But you would, with the exception of it was a national security state killing.
Yeah.
It wasn't Oswald. It was the only answer you can come up with. It was the national security state. Horrendous. So, I think we need something similar. That's my 2 cents on that. So.
Yeah. All right, well let's park Fraser on the shelf for a while till we have some more information to go on. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is Beckham and Chrisman. Now these are two interesting
Absolutely.
characters. You know, they kind of first pop up in the narrative in the Garrison investigation, and we really don't get much from them in the course of the grand jury testimony. You know, a whole lot of nebulous speak and denials and, you know, things of this nature. But when it comes time to the HSCA, and by this time Chrisman's dead, and, you know, a bunch of other people are dead, and they give old Tommy Beckham immunity for his testimony, we suddenly get a different version of events and a different story, which I think is very interesting. And I first came across it, you know, in your files there from the HSCA and his interview there. So Richard, let's get into Beckham and Chrisman and how they kind of factor into the assassination.
If you want to, we kind of want to lay some background on the UFO angle with Fred
Sure.
Chrisman especially, because he's notorious for the Maury Island incident. So, I mean, there's going to be about 20 minutes of background information anyways on UFOs in general, because, you know, Chrisman is just totally tied into that from like a deep cover operative.
Yeah, well, lay it out for us, because I mean, this is important when you're starting to look at government operatives and what exactly the UFO movement was you know, set up, designed for, and could possibly have been there to explain or divert attention from. And it's important about the time this first pops up. So yeah, go ahead, Richard, and lay the groundwork for us. And I guess Maury Island would be a great place to start, or Roswell, whatever you want to do. Well, Maury Island supposedly happened before Roswell, right?
Well,
I think so.
Yeah.
Technically.
Well, Roswell was basically July 4th, 1947. July 3rd and 4th, or 3rd or 4th, in there. And it was about 3 weeks after that Chrisman got in touch with this guy, Kenneth Arnold. Now, he had the sighting about 10 days before Roswell that kind of started the whole flying saucer hysteria. Because he was, Kenneth Arnold was like a real solid all-American guy. He was a respected businessman. He sold fire extinguishers. He was a member of the Idaho Search and Rescue division, whatever, and he logged between 40 and 100 hours flying every single month. So he had a lot of contacts, and he was just kind of an all-American kind of guy and a well-respected person. So when he was up flying up by Mount Rainier at the end of June, would be 1947, and he saw about 9. He told reporters that they look like saucers when you skip them on water, and that's when the whole term "flying saucer" came into the popular lexicon. And so Roswell was about 10 days after that, and then about 3 weeks after that, near the end of July, Chrisman gets in touch with Kenneth Arnold, and he tells him a story that he was out on Puget Sound up in near Seattle, Tacoma, with this harbor master named Harold Dahl, and that they were buzzed by a UFO, a whole bunch of UFOs, but one of them looked like it was in trouble and started spitting out like silvery just hunks of like refuse, like slag, and so he collected some of this in his shoebox and he showed it to Kenneth Arnold, and Arnold said, well, hey, I know a couple Air Force intelligence guys. He gets in touch with them, and they fly up from Hamilton, California, and they look at it. And they realize right off the bat that they see like a square-headed rivet inside there, among other stuff. That this is just cheap aluminum refuse, you know. And then there's a little bit disgusted. And Christman admits that, oh well, you know, it was a hoax, you know. And but unfortunately, when the investigators went back home the next day, their plane crashed right after takeoff, and so the hoax lives on, mostly through a story in the kind of this National Enquirer type tabloid that was called Amazing Stories, published out of Chicago or something. But you know, suddenly the Maury Island incident, it was a hoax. It was admitted hoax, but it became an incident now. And so people wonder, you know, what was going on with this. So the thing with Christman, he's at the time of that, he was 27 years old. He had served in the Office of Strategic Services, the intelligence unit during World War II. And he had participated in Operation Paperclip to help evacuate Nazi scientists from Germany to America. And
it may have had contact with Clay Shaw at this time. I just want to throw that in there.
Well, I don't know if it's documented. I think he probably did have contact with Clay Shaw during the war, as well. They became friends and knew each other, anyways. And so I think the reason was to try and to make get the public thinking that the saucers that Kenneth Arnold had seen were extraterrestrial. But I think in actuality they were probably constructed by the Nazis. There was a huge Nazi saucer program that's well documented. They had, there are numerous, dozens and dozens of photographs. I have one in my book of a 138-foot Hanabu saucer. It has those spherical charge condensers on the bottom. It's if you get a real good copy of this picture, there's like you can see the Maltese cross on it, and it's about 50 feet high, about 140 feet across. And I'm looking at the 6 little people in a shack right beside it. You know, it's just this gigantic machinery, and they were doing this. They were they had a little aerospace and weapons development center on a peninsula out extending into the Baltic Sea. You know, like 2,000 scientists housed there for like 6 years, from 1937 to about 1943. They pinned them on the base. And that's where all the V1 and V2 missiles were developed, which they used to launch bombing attacks on London and whatnot. And so it's 2,000 scientists for 6 years developing God knows what. And it got leveled, it got targeted specifically by the Allies, but after that, the Germans just went underground. They had huge underground manufacturing complexes in Bavaria and in southern Poland, and also on the border in Czechoslovakia, and on the border between Poland and Germany. It was just massive, 2-3 miles dug into these mountains, where they would just manufacture more V1s and V2s, and had giant wind tunnel testing, and on and on and on. Brilliant engineering complexes. And there was even a report that came out after the war, a Swedish newspaper. It had a story of Werner von Braun was personally oversaw the development of a 20-foot flying saucer. And he was also researching atomic power as a means to reduce fuel consumption. So it shouldn't be automatically assumed that we got the A-bomb that Germans had. You know, we're not looking into uranium. They were. It was uranium machine that was destroyed at Camp Mecklenburg as the Allies were approaching. And so there's a lot we don't know, and there's one YouTube that anyone who's curious about the state of the art of the Nazi saucer program. It's called, if you Google up a German UFO base in Brazil, you see about a 5-minute YouTube. We see a squadron of about 7 or 8 saucers, and they're all coming down. They're charging up at these gantry type kind of platforms, and so they have little spherical charge condensers on the bottom, and they're also there's like an army helicopter approaching them from Argentina or wherever, somewhere in Brazil, and the saucers turn invisible while this thing is approaching them. So they have cloaking abilities. So you really have to wonder. It's funny. I saw a news blurb on Fox News yesterday. We're releasing CIA's releasing all kinds of UFO footage from the 40s and 50s. Great revelation.
Yeah.
And, all these things. The old photos, they look like old tin pot Nazi flying saucers. They don't look like streamlined things that you might see today. They kind of look like the old Edsels packets of the flying saucers. And this was the weird thing. It's like when the first saucers got reported in the late 40s, a lot of them would match the photos or accounts of Nazi constructed machines. So that's a little bit weird. And
just to clear it up, Richard, real quick. I mean, what we're talking about here, folks, we're not talking about little green men from outer space and UFOs. We're talking about Nazi technology. We're talking about intelligence groups and the fight for this technology, and in the years since, enhancing such technology to God knows what it's capable of today. But the Nazis were way ahead of their time when it came to aerospace and rockets and flying ships. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that they would have had developed some kind of technology, flying saucer type technology, that could, do these feats, defy gravity, become invisible. Things like this would have been considered very, very important for our intelligence people to get their hands on and conceal from the public. Hence we get the UFO alien story. But I'm sorry, Richard.
Well, you get another thing. There was way back in 1952. There was a very famous flyover over the government complex in Washington. In July 1952, it was even photographed in Life magazine, because they had 11 of them that were in like a V formation, flying right over the Capitol building. And a whole lot more were picked up on military radar. And Seamus Coogan had mentioned this in the nice article he wrote. But apparently at the time that the Navy had a guided missile that they would keep you on the wraps, and they had jet interceptors removed from Andrews Air Force Base, says here, to Newcastle, Delaware, 90 miles away, during the same time frame as these sightings. So that's kind of weird, because what I would think instead is that you really can't get a cruise missile to a flying formation, at least not in 1952. They weren't that far developed. They were basically working off of the Nazi V-1.
Yeah, they were basically rockets on steroids, yeah.
Yeah, they launched those things from sleds, a track on a sled, with that thing up into the air. So I think if you get some things that can fly in formation like this, I think you're really looking at is probably some squadron of these Nazi UFOs. And what's interesting, if jet interceptors were removed from Andrews Air Force Base at the time to kind of give these the squadron window to be seen. I mean, you have to have collusion. There's people in cahoots with the people running the Nazi UFOs that know that we want to get our jet interceptors out of the way. So I mean, this is it just conjures up the whole idea that there might be a secondary space program, a deep black secret space program going on. I mean, even let me quote here. I mean, Truman was not in the loop because he had ordered a shoot down order, and I can read that one sentence right here. Okay, he had his chief of staff, General Omar Bradley, following the instructions of the president. The Defense Department gives orders to shoot down all UFOs which refuse to land upon being told to do so. Not that they're going to, but I mean, if you picture the little green men flying those things, they're not going to do anything. But it's at least on the face of it, even the chief of staff was not being told what's going on as far as what are these things are flying over the Capitol. And so that kind of stunt has never been repeated. But I mean, you have, JFK was, I think he was in the House in 52, but he was on his way to becoming a senator. And if you recall or know about the 50s, it was a time of science fiction movies and a great deal of public interest in the UFO phenomenon. It's became a mania. And one thing about, Kenny, his own personal interaction with what UFOs may have been or whatever, if he's not going to get it straight from the people who are running the thing, I mean, he may have got it from one of his advisors, and one guy was Arthur Lundahl, who was the head of the National Photo Interpretation Center, and he was the guy who had briefed everybody on when the U-2s made their overflights of Cuba. And he would just interpret all the tiny little missile launch sites and trucks and garages and what have you on the photos, those big briefing boards that they used in the cabinet room when the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on. So he was he's one of the world's most foremost authorities on UFOs because apparently 80% of his massive home library was all about UFOs. And it's recorded that JFK and Arthur Lundahl had an off-the-record meeting on September 7th, 1962. And it's not recorded what they talked about. But as it works out, on September 11th, JFK went down to Alabama, to the Redstone Arsenal down in Huntsville, and he met with Werner von Braun, who's running the NASA program at the time, and the two of them got into an argument about what's the best means propulsion to get to the moon, because von Braun was all wrapped up in the Saturn V cluster. The JFK looked at a test flying a Saturn booster there, but I think JFK might have had other ideas that it wasn't, the only method. So, and of course the next day it was where the president went to Rice Stadium and boldly proposed to send the man to the moon before the decade was through. So. You have to. I think you have to wonder what President Kennedy actually knew as compared to what was officially put out.
Well, I'd probably say not too much. I think the CIA would have considered it, above his pay grade, so to speak. But we do have documents, from November of 1963, where he's, requesting from the CIA information on flying saucers. When we're talking a week or two before his assassination.
Well, this here, that's one of the Timothy Cooper documents. It's pretty well debunked from Seamus's article I mean, that he had concocted that thing himself. He had, for whatever reason.
Oh, really? Shit.
He, he fabricated that particular document because it was November 12th. He had put out National Security Action Memorandum number 271, which went to the head of NASA, who was James Webb, and he asked for specified cooperation in lunar landing programs with the Soviet Union, and all substantive proposals is what his term was, for cooperation with the USSR on outer space matters. So when this document was fabricated, that would include Engelson's signature. As how he got that, I'm not quite sure, but he admitted that it was a hoax. He admitted it in 2009 to a fellow named Robert Hastings, and it was probably part of this grand disinformation project that he was working on with Richard Doty, who was an Air Force Officer of Special Investigations disinformation specialist.
Now you're talking about like the all those majestic papers and all that stuff.
Yes, absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely. Not to get too long-winded about that, but they've been pretty thoroughly debunked.
Right.
And it's basically like a psyops kind of thing where you'd put out this myth that there was like a 12-person majestic council, whatever, that would review UFO policy and decide, that they were a level above the president and this and that.
Right.
But the thing was, there's always a grain of truth in there, though. It's like there's something in there that's true that they're trying to tell us. What was the reason for this story is one thing I've wondered, because Timothy Cooper has not come forward since he was exposed. And
so one thing I always thought, Richard,
it was like,
when it comes to this whole UFO story, in my mind, I always thought that it was that this it kind of morphed into something that they just went with, because of course they don't want the public to know about the technology if it exists. They don't want to know that they brought all these Nazi scientists over here to continue working on some of this stuff. They don't want people to know what they're doing at Area 51 as far as possibly progressing this technology. And if these things are caught in the sky, what better way to say, to cover it up and say, oh, they must be aliens. It's just UFOs. It's this and that, and then people crazy. Conspiracy people get crazy with it. And they're looked at as kooks and it's dismissed, and largely to the world, we have this supposed UFO phenomenon, all over the world. There's been hundreds of thousands of sightings all over the world, for
there's been like 25 million.
Well, really? Okay, we got millions. And, people are seeing something. We know what's supposed to be flying in the air and what's not supposed to be flying in the air. And, you can put everything in the latter category into unidentified flying objects. And what are people actually seeing? It's hard to tell. But, we have a lot of video from this stuff. We see what we see. And I'll admit that I'm intrigued. And, I think this whole UFO thing, and Fred Chrisman is important for actually starting this, way, way, way back and planting the seed in people's minds that these UFOs are alien phenomena and not terrestrial phenomena,
Absolutely. It's funny that the notorious hacker, British computer hacker, named Gary McKinnon, it was about 15 years ago. He was like looking over the NASA website, and he found spreadsheets for 25 non-terrestrial officers, it was called. He was threatened with prosecution and this and that and the other. But non-terrestrial officers, and plus they had like 8 or 10 spaceships that they were operating. And, so what's the story there? It's just, I'll tell you quickly offhand what my own personal conclusions are. I think there is kind of some secret space program going on.
Yeah.
Has its own agenda, and there has to be, not like there's an MJ-12, but it has to be 4 or 5 or 6 people that, like the chairman of Joint Chiefs, the head of the CIA, the head of Wright-Patterson, the head of Vandenberg Air Force Base out in California, which has its own launch pad. Some other people, head of like Area 51 or whatever. I think they all have to kind of confer with each other, get together sometimes just to see, because this is partially human-driven craft, and part of it I think is extraterrestrials as well. That's my own belief. I mean, I've had 4 close encounters, I'll say, over the course of my life, and I went to the Roswell Museum once, and I met one of the guys that he'd been a young mortuary assistant at the time, and he was asked to provide 4 hermetically sealed coffins to the crash site, and he had a friend who was a nurse as well, had done an autopsy of one of these alien bodies, and she had told him about the horrible smell that they had. It was like some kind of pungent ammonia or whatever. And so this guy said this right to my face, and I just don't have any reason not to believe him. He didn't seem like a deluded individual or whatever, to me, or a charlatan.
Yeah.
He seemed like he was telling me a straight story. And so I have a belief in like alien beings or whatever, but I don't spend a lot of time anymore. I'm not that curious about it anymore. I don't really care. I don't know how to describe it.
But they're not messing with us, if they are visiting us, they're just kind of keeping their distance and watching. It's not like they're landing anywhere, and they might be abducting people and conducting tests and putting them back. I don't know, but for the most part, they seem pretty hands off if they are visiting. For the most part,
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think they're kind of demonic entities, and I think they are messing with us. I think they are harvesting people, and I don't know. There's just a very dark reason why they're here, and I would not trust them as far as I could throw them. I don't want. It's like, what's the expression? E.T. phone home. My own take is E.T. go home. I'm willing to kill them. I think I have zero fear of those things. I would I'd go after them in less than a heartbeat. And I think lightning takes down their saucers, and also would manufacture ball lightning can wipe them out no matter what they get. If you can generate a lot of ball lightning, which you can succeed in doing that if you really carefully look at the patents of Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
And you can generate 600 volt ball lightning to direct it right at them, and then you'll have no fear. As long as you have, in the Book of Matthew, okay, and I'm a devout Christian, but it describes them as their name is Legion, And I look at those things as just a whole legion of demons. They're just all part of the end time scenario kind of thing, They're up to no good. I don't want them around, my yard or whatever. So, anyways, it's definitely part of the texture of our times, And the problem is you can't get a straight answer about this whole question. It's like nothing logical, because the fraudsters are people who just want to make money, or your mind goes around and around spinning, and it just doesn't get a logical conclusion out of it. It's just not
Yeah, it's just like the JFK
My mind is-
assassination with some people, you know.
Yeah. You know, people can, like, it's funny, there's like, about 15 years ago, I used to, for a couple of years, I had trouble sleeping. I'd stay up and listen to a show about the paranormal called Coast to Coast AM. You know, I realized eventually it's another business. The paranormal is another business, and people, you know, want to get, you know, filled with that kind of thing. And sometimes it's stimulating, and sometimes it's just like, you know, the same old cow manure. You know, it's just so. Anyway, so with that, talking that on Christmas a little bit, I mean, that kind of gives you what his specialty was, and because I mean, there's information he did, at least on the Beckham's HSCA interview, he does mention that Christmas worked on Project Blue Book, which was, you know, a pretty famous Air Force whitewash program, actually, just to explain away the UFOs. It says it's a swamp gas or weather balloons or, you know, geese or what have you, just, you know, so the public would have a story. And you know, apparently the skinny on Blue Book is like, those were the low threat cases, the easy ones. You know, there was a whole secret dossier like called that Project Grudge dealt with. There was all the scary stuff, you know, the
X-Files.
Yes, X-Files stuff, absolutely. And I mean, when Garrison stumbled onto Christmas, he had him. Well, his words were, he's an operative at a supervisory level, a deep cover level, a long-range clandestine intelligence mission. I mean, that's Fred Christman right there, and he's one of the first people that Clay Shaw contacted once Clay Shaw got arrested. I mean, what's going on there? And then, you know, Christman he had such a high security clearance. He had like a phone under his dashboard.
Yeah.
And he could contact Looking Glass. Looking Glass is like this plane from the SIC command, which has all the nuclear codes that they put up in the air at all times in case there's a nuclear war. And I mean, you know, so
yeah, this guy's a big deal. I mean, people didn't have phones in their cars in the 50s and 60s. They just didn't, you know.
Oh, there you go.
But he did.
They could talk to an airplane like that. And I mean, and Beckham was like his young protege, his trusty sidekick. You know, they did together Batman and Robin or whatever. And they're really both part of the Guy Bannister apparatus, that little cell down New Orleans. All these undercover creeps walking around town doing whatever they want, you know, they're up to. So I mean, there's
because Guy Bannister was working for the FBI. You know, he was investigating these so-called UFO cases out in the Midwest.
His was the first X-File. Believe it or not, I mentioned that in my book. Yeah, it was some little disc that was found in Idaho right after. Well, I wouldn't want to find out. I mean, but it was right after Roswell. They found like a 30-inch saucer or something that was really weird.
Yeah.
You know, the report was filed by this guy. I think he was operating out of Bozeman, Montana at the time, and it turned out to be Guy Bannister. Yeah, it was preceded by an X/whatever, his first X-File, which is interesting. He's the first Fox Mulder.
Yeah, and also, look, when you're talking about Bannister and people like Christman, their politics was, of course, far right, you know, extreme right-wingers we're talking about here. You know, ties to the John Birch Society that also gave them a more special kindred relationship as well. These guys have a lot of the same ideals and things of this nature too, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's weird too. I mean, to get kind of gnarly. You know, I mean, Clay Shaw was like a sexual deviant. You know, he was you know, into like sadomasochism.
Yeah.
With young homosexuals, and Christman was the same way. It was they shared that, you know, proclivity for.
So was Ferry. So so was General Walker. So was all
Ferry
these people
too. Yeah, and what's weird is like Ferry and Christman were both bishops in this apostolic old Catholic Church of North America. This kind of offshoot of the Russian Orthodox Church, and there was self-appointed bishops with phony credentials, and then their young Thomas Beckham was ordained as a priest in this church. So it was weird. They
Well, Beckham was instrumental in getting a lot of these guys these false credentials. I mean, he was kind of a small-time hood, a forger, a con man in his own right, and he had skills when it comes to forging documents and credentials and things of this nature.
Yeah, well, he was, he admitted to Joan Mellon in her book, Farewell Justice. He had been sent to the CIA's training facility, Camp Peary, through the help of Fred Christman. That's like a month-long indoctrination program, and how to be a spy and a creep and, general lowlife,
Yeah.
So, he also mentioned hanging out with Lee Harvey Oswald. They'd go to Bannisters together, and this is in his autobiography, which you had sent me, but they hung out at there was a church there on Rampart Street in New Orleans, which the anti-Castro operatives were used to cover, and they'd hang out there and hang out with Clay Shaw at Horace Pina's Havana Bar, which is down by the customs area, down the waterfront.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stories that were covered up during the Garrison trial, because Clay Shaw walked,
Yeah, and I should say too, Richard, that when Lee Harvey Oswald's handing out his leaflets, which Thomas Beckham mentions in his HSCA testimony that he was there when Oswald was handing his leaflets out, and then went to get a Coke with him afterwards. But we do have pictures from that day, and I'll be damned if it doesn't look like a guy with a pompadour haircut and a suit, standing behind Lee Oswald in front of the trademark, kind of hiding his face. And that could be Beckham. He's putting himself there, and we have photographs from the day, and it really looks like him. If and I'll put all these photos up on the website so you can go see them for the folks out there listening, and you can make up your own mind. But to me, it's a possibility. If Beckham's to be believed, he says he was there, and we have photos, and there's a guy that looks an awful lot like him there, Richard.
Well, yeah, there is in Joe Mellon's book, there is a distinct photo that shows him. I think he's dressed in black, which is, he admits that it was him. So, I'll take his word for it. That day, I think it was August 16th, in front of the International Trademark, he's handing out leaflets with a bunch of other people. I think Groton has actually just found a picture of Clay Shaw in the background in some white suit, where he's entering like a side entrance. So that's a very nefarious place, and that Oswald would. There were a lot of undercover operatives in that area at the time that he was handing out the leaflets. It was kind of like a PR stunt. But there was a lot of intelligence people looking on as he, did that. So I think that the idea was to set him up as a Castro-loving goofball, and that would help lay the table for painting him up as a patsy, when the time came for Dallas in November. So I don't know. It was the one quote from there is HSCA interview Oswald. Well, anyways, he's giving the affirmation that Oswald did work for the FBI, and from the way he expressed it is that he worked directly for J. Edgar Hoover, because here's a quote here. He said he didn't worry about those local FBI. The chief would take care of him. That he had his ends, and that this was no worry. And the chief would take care of him, but he was referring to the head of the FBI. So, I mean, this...
well, he could have been referring to Bannister, too. I mean, if Bannister was running the show down there, he's former FBI, you know what I mean? And it's possible. I mean, It's
possible, yeah. No, you have a point there. I mean, but...
I mean, just in my mind, I think, Bannister was running that part of, he was running the show in New Orleans, basically. I mean, he had CIA contacts, he's former FBI, he's part of all these anti-Castro groups and these extreme right-wingers, and he's running point on a lot of this stuff that's really affecting Oswald and, kind of setting him up here. And, you have all these guys working for him. Bannister is the man, and everybody's working for him. So, it could be he could be possibly referring to Bannister. I mean, Hoover to me is a leap. But
I see your point. I guess it came out recently that Beckham was in Dallas, and this is something I suspected when I wrote my book. I thought he was actually the guy who was in front of the shoe store that snuck into the theater. I thought that was his role, and I think Joe Mellon is really working on that aspect because he still has some more information to get out of Beckham. But I mean, there's a big puzzle there, a big piece of the puzzle that he could have been. I think Oswald got a ride from his drumming house to the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I don't think he killed Tippett, but he was in the theater somewhere around 7 or 8 minutes after 1, and someone gave him a ride, or he might have been like the guy that planted the jacket at the Tippett murder scene. Right behind the Texaco station there. He could have been the imposter in the shoe store, or he could have been there was a guy arrested out back there.
Mm-hmm.
That a pet shop owner, Bernard Hare, had seen, some fellow that looked like Oswald, and he taken out the back.
So did Butch Burroughs.
Butch Burroughs, yeah. So,
yeah, he said that too.
Yeah, there's some major question mark that Beckham's going to fill. He's going to, he's been a rabbi, say, for the last 20 years or whatever. I think he's using religion as a cover, just to protect himself from whatever repercussions, protect his, to save his own soul, or just to look like a good guy. And
you read his book. I mean, it's I like how in the back of his book he's got all these testimonials from all these other random religious guys and more documents or diplomas or what have you of everything that he's accomplished in his religious endeavors supposedly, but it's hard to believe that he found a I mean, it's possible he could have turned his life around, but back then he was he was just a thug, a con man, a shyster. And
absolutely.
It's hard to believe that he's changed, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that kind of a character stays with you, and it's kind of like indicative of how deeply Beckham is. Even though he's just like a gopher, a little guy, but how integral to the plot he is, because you see that during Garrison's investigation, it was Fred Chrisman who protected Thomas Beckham.
Mm-hmm.
He was on the run. He went to Washington State, and then later it was Nebraska.
Yep.
And Fred Chrisman is his protector the whole time, kind of telling him how to lay low or who should stay with. And
mm-hmm.
He has a interesting quote in his HSE interview. about it kind of summarizes Christman's role in the whole thing. The whole picture was Fred. He was. Fred had the ins and outs and the answers, and he knew everybody connected to the thing. Everybody. Fred knew about how things had taken place, things that happened. Fred knew everything that took place. I mean, so, I don't know. I think Christman was one of the key operatives of the whole JFK plot. You might theorize, for example, Howard Hunt, the famous Watergate spy. He was a deeply tied into him. But I look at Christman as almost like the number one agent on the ground to run the whole, JFK show. So
yeah.
It's strange how the House Select Committee just totally backed off on this guy.
Well, I think it's important too, Richard, that we should tell everybody what exactly Beckham said that he did, and on behalf of who he did it for. What I'm talking about when they sent him to Dallas before the assassination.
Oh yes, that was another major piece of information we got from Bill Mellon's book. He was around 2 weeks before the assassination, he had gone to Dallas to deliver a package with maps and 8x10 photos and diagrams of buildings. And he had acquired this in G. Ray Gill's office in New Orleans with in the company of David Ferry and Clay Shaw in this New Orleans musician lowlife called Leighton Martins. So he was given $200 by G. Ray Gill, this attorney, to fly to Dallas and deliver this package to the soldier of fortune named Lawrence Howard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Howard was a guy who had been training at No Name Key down in the Everglades as part of the CIA JM Wave hit team against Castro.
Yeah.
And the one of the major theories of the JFK assassination is that this particular hit team got turned and they went after Kennedy. And they spread themselves around Dealey Plaza. I mean, there's another fellow, Roy Hargraves, was part of this team,
yeah,
who made a deathbed confession that he was posing as a Secret Service agent. And this is another, Johnny Roselli, the famous mobster, he was involved with these soldiers of fortune at No Name Key. And also Jerry Patrick Hemming was another fellow. So there's a whole bunch of commando types.
Felipe Santiago and...
Yes. And then, so Beckham is giving the advanced intelligence about the layout of Dealey Plaza to Lawrence Howard. And he ends up staying in town, or no, rather, if he did return, but he returned he returned to New Orleans, then he came back to Dallas by the 22nd.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very suspect. That's there's a lot more of his story that he's kept inside his soul.
Yeah, and while
hopefully,
that's fascinating just on its own. But when you couple it with some other things, Richard, like HSCA investigator L.J. Delsa, he was interviewed a couple years ago, and in the interview he stated very plainly that when he went to Lawrence Howard's house in California to interview him, they left the interview. He left the interview thoroughly convinced that Lawrence Howard was one of the shooters. And this guy is a seasoned homicide detective. He has gut feelings, on things, and his instincts are very aware and perceptive. And after speaking to this guy for an hour, he walked out of there and said, he looked at his partner and said, we just met the guy who shot the president. And when you couple that with what Beckham is telling us, that he delivered this information, this hit team information to Lawrence Howard in Dallas, it makes it a little bit more hard to discount, or just throw away as being somebody's story,
Oh, Howard was absolutely involved. I mean, there's no question in my mind. I had him, my guess on him was that he was the driver of the White Rambler with a luggage rack on top that picked up Oswald. But that's just my guess. I just don't know. But I mean, he owned a Rambler, that was probably used on the assassination day, and he was described as a friend of his said he was heavily armed or whatever. During the HSC investigation, he was just barricaded inside his apartment with all kinds of ammunition and stuff, just ready to take on the world or whatever. He looked like a real mean character.
Oh yeah, him and Lauren Hall and all those guys. I mean, these guys were mercenaries. They could be hired to kill for sure. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's what they did. That's what they lived to do. And they would have been tied to these guys, of course, through these Cuban raiders. These anti-Castro groups that are prominent in New Orleans and in Texas and in California. These guys are running guns. They're running medical supplies from the west to the east coast. For use in Cuba, and all along the way, they're stopping, they're talking to people, they're collecting funds to do their things. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they were offered this hit to do because, these guys are professionals. They wouldn't hesitate, and they would get their money, and they wouldn't talk, So.
Absolutely, and there was such a wave of they call for just Kennedy's head. This bloodthirsty Cubans, and they just would talk up this violence at their DRE meetings, the Student Revolutionary Council, and it was a banana republic kind of mentality.
Yeah, I mean they were blaming him for, of course, the Bay of Pigs and letting all these Cubans die on the shores with no military support. And if that wasn't good enough, then you have, of course, the anti-communist sentiment as well. To feed into people's hatred of Kennedy. They were deeming him soft on communism. He wanted to be, he was practically inviting the Russians in to take over the country. He wasn't doing anything about Cuba.
Oh yeah, he was up against the enemies from all sides. But if you get a bunch of rabid dogs like theyese Cubans, they're useful idiots. There's people like them would be just little tools and would be used by the CIA or by the big Texas politicians or the military, used by whomever. I mean, and they could themselves just be blame free. Just have those guys do all the dirty work. And you'd never even know. If you do about 3 different generations of paymasters and planning men, you just never get traced back to who really arranged the whole thing.
Exactly.
I mean, that was a whole plan. Let them get hung, whatever, electrocuted.
Yeah.
You get blamed for Kennedy's murder. Meanwhile, the CIA people and the military people and the politicians would all be scot-free. It was such a cataclysmic shift in the nation's history and the way we were going. Because you look at our 52 years since then, I mean, it's kind of been we've just been going downhill. I mean, morally and as far as being an imperialist power and stuff, with just all kinds of mistakes in the world. It looks to me, it's just it's such a sad loss. And it's in a way, it's sorry that a really fine, bold, courageous man like him. It's just nobody has the gumption, the courage to stand up for him and look at this guy that got taken out by these dark forces and came right from our own country, basically. And it's just nobody will stand up for them. Just everybody wants to forget it, and I don't know. It's just
Well, they all got away with it except for their designated patsy, which was they carefully crafted, this plan, to one, distance themselves from the actual shooters, and two, to have somebody to very quickly take the blame and shift the blame away from the people who, really had the motive to do this.
Absolutely. I don't know what a Cuban could hope to gain out of this thing. Maybe a glorified good job or something. But I mean, that's
Well, I think money was a big thing, because you look at a couple of these guys like Lauren Hall and Lawrence Howard. I think Lauren Hall bought a motel in California after the assassination.
Yeah, he was. He had a little resort complex up there in California. Yeah, he was set up for life.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite obvious to me. These guys were taken care of, and sure, they might have had a little bit of infighting. when it come to, I think one of them was running their mouth that they were the people at Odio's house, and then the other one kind of refuted that, and then the other one recanted on that. But all in all, over the years, these guys went their separate ways after this, and the whole Kennedy assassination really kind of diffused the anti-Castro movement, and people had to kind of shift their focus on other things like integration, the civil rights, and all this other stuff that's happening in the country. Nothing stops just because the president gets killed. Everything keeps going, and it just kind of went kind of slided away a little bit. We've had our little investigations like the Garrison investigation, the HSCA since then, and we've gotten a lot of good information out of it. The question I have is why nobody is paying it any attention or giving it any credence. I mean, we have people admitting to doing things under the benefit of immunity, and people just discount it as he's a con man, he's lying, whatever, he's looking for fame, whatever. But Beckham's been telling us the same story for 30 years, but he didn't say what he started saying at the HSCA while Chrisman was still alive, because he was probably scared to death, to implicate him in anything, or himself, for that matter. But with the help of immunity, with the help that Chrisman is dead by then, he feels well enough to go ahead and tell his version of events. And when he's told the HSCA, he's told to Joan Mellon, and he's wrote in his own book. He could have came out with his own book and said, look, all that stuff I told the HSCA was a bunch of crap. I found God now. I want to tell the truth. But no, this man is saying to us, he's a man of God, and he's a rabbi, and this is still the truth that I'm telling you in this book, So you got to put some credence to that.
Absolutely. He didn't come out right out and say that he was a CIA agent, but there wasn't any other conclusion. He didn't use those words, but he did, talk about working for the company or for the agency. He's just
Yeah, he didn't deny it either. So
he didn't deny it. That's for sure. We can. There's some interesting stuff on the Tippit murder that involves Chrisman that we can look at. Because one thing that Beckham had told the HSCA was that the Abundant Life Temple had been established by Fred Chrisman, and they never looked into that. As it works out, the Abundant Life Temple was where Tippit's killer was last seen, right behind it, and it.
Well, they had a suspect holed up in there, didn't they? And then, because I went back and looked at the DPD radio logs, and I believe they said we've got a guy in the church, and then a couple minutes later, they're saying, "Oh, never mind, it's not the right guy. Carry on."
Well, there was a 134 transmission that said, send the squad over here, 10th and Crawford, check out the church basement.
Right.
And unfortunately, there was a minute later, there was a big rush to get to the nearby Jefferson Branch Library, because they had seen a young page run across the lawn, and somebody hit the siren because somebody had broadcast that they saw the suspect there.
Right.
They saw this guy who worked at the library. He's running in to tell all the people there that they'd been told that the killer was on the loose, and they should lock the doors and stuff. And so somebody hit the siren, and all the squad cars all raced over there, and they left the Abundant Life Temple. All was left there was Gerald Hill and William Alexander were the two guys, and they talked to two little old ladies in the back of that Abundant Life Temple. And those two little old ladies assured them that nobody had gone in there. But this is a building that's a half a block long, has 100 rooms, and it's probably 4 stories high.
Yeah.
And they took because 2 minutes later, Gerald Hill was back at the a half a block away at the Tibbet murder scene, making a broadcast about shells and stuff like that. So you just didn't spend any time there at the Abundant Life Temple. You did not give it any kind of search. And
well, that's why I always thought, Richard, that possibly, because I always have this question pop up, it was Oswald's gun that shot Tippett. That's been proven, blah, 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 blah. So how, if there was an imposter, how did they use Oswald's gun, and then how does it somehow end up on Oswald at the theater? And I always tell them, say, look, the church is the key. That whoever shot Tippett, ran to that church, met with Hill, who happened to be at all 3 crime scenes, mind you, and also at the Texas Theater. They could have went in the theater with Oswald sitting there. They could have, gotten a little scuffle, a gun hits the floor, somebody picks it up. This is his gun, and they could have just pinned it on him that way.
Well, I think it was his gun. It had bad firing pin. One thing that's a little bit weird there is the ammunition. There was 2 kinds of ammunition. You had Remington's bullets and Winchester bullets, and he had one kind. He had both kinds loaded in his gun. He had just all one kind in his pocket. And if you do the math there, and Tippett got killed by both brands, a bullet. But I think if you do the math there, it's roughly only a 7-to-1 chance that if he's randomly feeding the bullets while he's supposedly replenishing his revolver as he's walking away from the scene, the odds are like 7-to-1 against them ending up aligned as they did. Like half of the. Well, I can't find it at the moment in my book, but I mean, I laid it out pretty clearly that it's kind of dodgy. I think that they actually they fired these things after the fact, like on November 23rd and November 24th.
Yeah.
To get these new shells, because the shells, they could not find the officer's markings in there.
Right.
Couldn't find Officer Poe's little markings, and everybody has a little diamond point pen.
Right.
When they look at the property and pass through, you have the chain of possession or whatever, for legal reasons.
Yeah.
An officer gives it to Secret Service agents and whatever. They have to mark their initials and stuff. And, Poe's initials were never there, never found. So he's the guy that supposedly found the shells, and it's a little bit dodgy on that whole scene. So I mean, it was pretty easy for police to set them up.
Well, interesting too, Richard. A guy I'm friendly with and have had on the show before, a guy named David Josephs. He's done a lot of research on these guns and bullets. And from analyzing the bullets that were supposedly found in Oswald's pocket after he was arrested, you can see where they had been held for some time in a gun belt, much like police officers wear.
Oh yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah, and of course
That's
Oswald.
interesting.
Yeah, Oswald didn't own one of those, so it is very interesting because when they're bullets left in a gun belt for some period of time, without use, you just leave them in there. If you don't fire your gun, you leave your bullets in the gun belt. And what it does, the leather, of course, has chemicals that react to the metal in the bullets, and it leaves a kind of a sheen or an image on the casing. And this is what we have appearing on these Oswald bullets that were found in his pocket. So I thought that was very interesting.
That is very interesting. Another little fun fact on that murder is that the cabbie who was parked right around the corner of 10th and Patton. I mean, the cabbie used to park there regularly for his lunch break, and he said that he used to see Tippett there every day. And there's the woman who rented the house on the corner, Virginia Davis. She lived there with her sister. She thought Tippett lived right next door, right where he was killed. So, I mean, what's going on? This is not his patrol district. It was William Mensel's patrol district, and he's 5 miles away from his own patrol district. So,
yeah, I think he had a side piece living over there.
Why is Tippett at this place?
Wasn't one of Jack Ruby's dancers living there?
Oh, I mean, that was
Kay Coleman.
I think it was Kathy Kay.
Kathy Kay.
Her boyfriend was Harry Olson, I think, and he had a bum knee, and he was I think he was a couple blocks over on 8th Ave, as I recall.
Yeah. And
but they were nearby. I mean, Ruby's place was just 3 or 4 blocks up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's a weird neighborhood.
Yeah.
So you get all kinds of scenarios where some Oswald imposter Oswald double could have stopped by Ruby's and walked up to 10th and Patton. You also get the story that came out with Joseph McBride's book, where a cop car was seen in the alley.
Right.
So it might have been a cop that actually shot Tippett. I mean, I don't have a handle on the what I used to think might have happened. I don't have a good grasp anymore because all the fundamentals have been smashed to pieces.
I know, it's so confusing,
And
it's one of those parts on it. I think we're still looking for the truth on when it comes to the Tippett killing.
Well, absolutely. But the thing is, if you get a church that's set up by Fred Chrisman 1 block away from where Tippett was killed and where the killer was last seen, I mean, you're talking Fred Chrisman's handwriting is all over this crime, in my opinion. And I think the Garrison, I mean, he received an anonymous letter in January of 1968, and it asked him, "Is it not strange that Chrisman knew Tippett?" I mean, eventually he determined that the guy who wrote the letter was Bob Lavender, who was a Treasury agent who worked. Beckham said he worked for the CIA, as a printer, but he also worked for, I believe, for the ATF, or at the time it was the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax, ANTT organization. But it's rather strange that Chrisman would know Tippett, that he would set up a temple right where, block away from where Tippett was killed. So, I mean, this is
I'll tell you,
suspicious.
yeah, well, I'll tell you some other weird things. Two that come to mind are, one, when you mention the name Harold Dahl, sounds a hell of a lot to me like Harold Doyle, one of the Tramps. But I'm sure that's just...
Oh, there you go. Yeah. I hear. Isn't that interesting? It's what's one thing that's funny about those Tramps is that they all have they all look like doubles. I mean, one of them was supposed to look like E. Howard Hunt, and he does. But there's another guy, I think, what's his name? Abrams or something. Gus Abrams.
Yep.
I think his name is. He looks also like E. Howard Hunt.
Or Sturgis.
And it was funny that, another guy that supposedly looked like Sturgis, another looked like Charles Harrison.
Yeah.
And I can't make them out. I mean, another guy that was supposedly Charles Rogers, who was like a psycho killer. Chopped up his parents or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't I don't look too hard into tramps anymore. Wow, those are some characters right there.
Yeah, but I tell you the other oddity that jumps out to me too, Richard, is when I look at the picture. Yeah, I guess it was drawn from Antonio Veciano's description of Bishop. Okay.
Yeah, Maurice Bishop. Yeah.
Yeah. When you look at that picture, and you understand that Fred Crispin, people did sometimes call him Bishop. Okay. Now, that picture to me looks a hell when you put it side by side, looks a lot more like Fred Crispin than it does David Atlee Phillips to me.
Okay. Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think there was one additional piece of evidence, though. I'm trying to recall. Someone found a name in the file for Maurice Bishop that was tied in with David Atlee Phillips. I believe it was the name Frank Turple is coming in as far as finding it down in some Miami CIA station that associated the alias Maurice Bishop with Phillips. So I could be mistaken here, but that's my recollection. Though there is a similarity to Fred Crispin, I agree. But, there's a very good similarity with David Atlee Phillips.
Yeah, and Jack Ruby had the name Bishop in his little phone book as well with a phone number. Well,
nothing he's tied into would surprise me. He's just in with the mob and CIA and who knows what. He's a man about town. He's in with half the DPD, and I think it had to have been in with the sheriff's office as well. And
I've been looking into his ties lately, and I came across an interesting character that worked for General Walker named William Duff. He was actually arrested a couple days after the attempted shooting of General Walker. He used to actually live in Walker's house for about 5 months prior to the Walker shooting, and he stated, he stated he saw Ruby in the company of 2 other men visit General Walker's house on the basis of approximately once a month. For 5 months they met behind closed doors. He doesn't know what they talked about. And then when you look at what Ruby was telling Earl Warren when he came to Dallas to interview him, he says, look, there's an organization, and that word keeps popping up, the organization, as Beckham calls it. Jack Ruby says, look, sir, there's an organization here in Dallas, and the John Birch Society mentions General Walker, and he's like, he's practically begging Earl Warren to get him the hell out of Dallas and take him to Washington. He says, you take me to Washington, I'll tell you whatever you want to know, but he said, Sheriff Decker told me to be a man, so I'm going to say it. There's an organization here, sir, and he was basically telling Warren, look, I'm scared to death because, these guys, and God knows what, he got mixed up in with them. And, if he was talking to him and you can kind of start making the ties from there. You know what I'm saying, Richard?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, the kaleidoscope of possibilities that arise from almost every little nuance of every little ambiguity. It's just, mind-boggling. Where do you go? Unfortunately, half the truth got bumped off, we were still trying to fit in the puzzles. Whatever Dorothy Kilgallen came up with when she interviewed Ruby in his jail cell, and she had told the press that people are going to be writing about this for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
And they are. It's just so. It's almost like Ruby said, it's the greatest conspiracy in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And you just wouldn't believe it if you knew the truth. And I think he's right. I empathize at times with Jack Ruby, even though he's one of history's flying bags, you know. And he's just a colorful, off-the-cuff character in a way as well. And,
yeah. Well, I've been reading this
I
book.
don't know.
I've been reading this book called General Walker and the Murder of President Kennedy, and it's a big book, Richard. It's like, pushing 700 some pages. And there's a lot of information in it. And there is a letter from General Walker to the Reverend Billy James Hargis, who was leader of this Christian crusade back then, very, very right wing. Yeah. And it was in 1966, and it was right after Jack Ruby had went into the hospital before his second trial there, and he was telling Hargis this. He said, the only way Jack Ruby is going to leave that hospital is in a box. Okay. He said he represents like the last obstacle from shifting the blame back onto the right wing, and this must be followed through with. And then he goes on to say, to mention RFK, and that RFK must be dealt with as insurance and assurance that the blame won't be shifted back to the right wing ever. So, it's crazy stuff, man.
What a crazy time. I mean, RFK and then Martin Luther King as well in '68. I mean, those were heavy duty conspiracies, It's just that time period of American history where they used domestic assassination as a tool, and how profoundly this eliminating a few key people just totally derailed. The country would have been a whole lot different with them around. So.
Oh, most definitely.
I don't know what to say. I don't know whether it can happen again or what, but hope to heaven it doesn't. That's all.
There's some crazy stuff going on in Oregon,
Well, yeah, I saw that video. You talk about the occupation of that wildlife reserve and stuff, and that guys get killed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the video of that. I just don't know what to make of it. I don't get a clear. I can't see exactly whether he was reaching for a gun or not, and I don't know, whose version of the story to believe. And this is happening constantly.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of cops shooting first and asking questions later here in the past couple of years, more than I think ever before in the history of the United States.
Absolutely. It's skyrocketed, and I don't know what. It's part of the fever of our times, because the natives are very restless. I mean, cops have a good reason to have itchy trigger fingers, because I mean, there's a lot of danger out there. You should not be.
Yeah.
In this country in the 60s, say, a little kid like me, I could walk around. When I was 5 years old, I could walk down the street in Boston to the local church or whatever. And, you just couldn't do that anymore because it's a very dangerous culture,
Yeah.
And the whole drug culture is, eroded people's morals, and it's just the amount of, we're fed with, guns and violence on television. It's just, really, I don't know what to say. It's just, not the country that I grew up in, and possibly we can make a turn for the better, but I really think we're going to have a cataclysmic,
conclusion.
Yeah. Something as wicked is going to happen. It's going to take that for us to wake up, but it's going to be devastating when it comes. I mean, it's just going to be a lot of calamity. So,
yep. Well, hey, Richard.
But hopefully, I just had. Hopefully, we have a chance. I hope that the truth about, especially John Kennedy, will come out there. That it doesn't fade into becoming another Lincoln kind of thing. Because I tell you, I always thought I was well educated because I grew up in Boston. You get pretty good education in that area, and it took me until I was like 30 years old to realize that Lincoln was assassinated by a conspiracy. I saw a picture in a Time Life book one winter's day of like 4 people hanging for conspiracy to murder President Lincoln. I didn't know this. I heard the whole story was, John Wilkes Booth, and I'm afraid that the same kind of thing is going to happen with John Kennedy. John's going to get buried. It was really, in my opinion, it was a massive conspiracy with a lot of high up people in government, and they got away with it.
Yeah, but a lot of these teachers, they take the easy way out, the lazy way out, and they teach us, okay, here's what the history books say, and that's all you get. Now I will say, there is a new breed of good teachers, and one of which is a gentleman by the name of Garland Brown in Tennessee, who actually teaches his children, that he has them do projects on the assassination, and he has them do like mock trials, and he has them really, really look at things. And he's doing really great things when it comes to educating our kids. And I think that's a direction that more teachers need to go in.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to, it's a lot easier just to, live in truth rather than live in a life of lies, because you always have to wonder who you said the what or whatever. But honesty is the best policy. It's just so much easier. Sometimes you don't know, but sometimes you forget. But I mean, it's just, truth is much better. It's just, it's got a certain ring to it, and I don't know. I just, the thing is, I feel real privileged in a way because it's really. It's just a group of citizens and of their own initiative who have really kept the flame alive about JFK. And, I know that when I get laid to rest or whatever, I have a satisfaction, a happiness there that I did something, to help preserve that part of our history, of our nation's history, really. Same as like any soldier, or whatever, or any, good cop, or anyone who does their job. This is, I feel like it's part of my social job, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, while you're still on this side of the grass, Richard, I want to personally thank you for everything you've done because you've brought us a ton of information, and I, for one, appreciate you and everything you've done. And look, if folks want to know more, if they want to get your book, visit your website. Let them know how they can do it, because I think you have written a great book, and your website presents your articles, and so please tell people how they can find your book and your website.
Well, the name of the book is Matrix for Assassination. It was my conclusions in 2009. Now I've grown since then, but it's still good. I still agree. I haven't looked at it for a couple of years, but I still agree with about 85% of it, and. It's available through my publisher is Trafford Publishing. So if you Google my name or something and Matrix of Assassination or Trafford Publishing, you could order the book. It's like $35, $34.95, I think. It's about 500 pages, and it's large sizes, kind of the size of a Life magazine, and it's really it's still pertinent. I think I have around 300 pictures in there, and I do not include an index, however, because I want to keep the cost down. And the index would have had to shoot it up to $40, so I just didn't want to do that.
Right.
And the other thing is my website, which has my articles, is www.jfkinsidejob.com, and so that has my my most recent essay that I put together this past year. It's really my my up-to-date, state-of-the-art conclusions, as far as basically, since the book, I've basically specialized in the book depository and, trying to figure out what happened inside there. And, so I've made a couple early essays that I probably should add to that website, but this is my 75-page essay that just says my case for what I think happened as far as my thinking at this moment. So
yeah, because I think you incorporated it, like the elevator escape theory and a little bit of the Potemkin Village aspect into it, the inside job one as well, and made it a more complete, up-to-date work. And also, folks, I got my copy of Richard's book on Amazon.com, so you can probably find it there as well. And like I say, JFK Inside Job, you got the PDFs right there. You can download them. You can print them out and read them. It's a great resource. So Richard, did we get to everything on Beckham and Chrism that you wanted to touch on today?
I think so. I think there's it's just it's kind of just sampling the pot as far as those guys, but that's pretty much a pretty comprehensive overview. I think there'll be more in the future, especially from Joan Mellon about Beckham. I'm sure she's hot on the trail of something, and but I think that basically exhausts my knowledge of those guys, except I could read a lot from a book, but then it's right in the book. And it's basically rehashing what we've already discussed. So I think that pretty well covers it, yeah.
Yeah, and I would also point, people, if you'd like to read more and go like really, really in depth on people like Chrisman, Ken Thomas has a great book called JFK and UFO, The Military Industrial Conspiracy and Cover-Up from Maury Island to Dallas. David Hechter Childress has a book called NASA, Nazis, and JFK. Includes the Torbett document and the JFK assassination. It's all good reading if you'd like to know more about the subject, because believe me, there's not a lot on it that hasn't been covered already. It's very hard to turn up information on Chrisman that we don't know already, that's not classified to the hilt. And like Richard said, we're still chipping away at the Beckham tree, and hopefully Joan Mellon can get us more from there. So Richard, I thank you very much for joining me today. I hope people like this episode. I know they loved the Inside Job show. I think we're up to 1,500 and some downloads of that now. So and a lot of good feedback, and hopefully we're going to get a lot more good feedback from this one.
Well, thanks, Rob. It's been a real pleasure. Again, a real privilege. I'm just enjoy speaking with you, and I'm just so glad that we've made this connection. So might be another time when we come up with some other subject, but I think we did pretty well here today. So.
Oh, most definitely. We're going to have to do it again, and I'm sure we'll come up with something we can talk about. So, Richard, you hang on the line for me. I'm going to talk us out, buddy. People, head over to tlgpodcast.com. I'm going to put up some pictures. I'm going to put up links to Richard's book where you can order it and see for yourself some of the stuff that we were talking about here today. You can see Guy Bannister holding a UFO and all kinds of cool stuff. So go check that out. There's some bitches in the can beamed up this satellite down directly to your ears. This is your boy,